Just to let everyone know that this session is being recorded. Eva, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, I just want to point out that if anybody wants to view the live caption, they are available. We're not using the live captions within Teams itself. We're using a separate one. So if you are using the Teams app, you should see a Q&A box and the URL to the captions will be in there. If you're using the browser, then if you go to the top of the chat, you should see it pinned there. And then it will open up a separate browser, one for our lovely faces and the other with the captions that you need. So, as I said, thank you for joining us at this dive-in event where we'll be discussing combating social media bullying. We discuss today's issues because, quite simply, they're vital, especially with social media playing such a huge part in our lives these days. So we're going to be taking a deep dive into how we can handle the abuse and negativity as we take up our rightful space in a virtual world. My name's Eva. My pronouns are she, they. I'll be facilitating today's conversation. I'm an activist, public speaker, and a writer. I'm also Director of Innovation at Birmingham Pride, and I sit on the Crown Prosecution Service's hate crime panel. Above all, I am a proud trans woman, like so many others, someone with presence online, which undoubtedly attracts hate and unwanted attention. Now, before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping for you all. I'll keep it brief because this is the boring bit, but also important. So what we discuss is solely based on our experiences today. There are lots of experiences out there, with each one unique to each person. So don't worry if nothing aligns with you completely or doesn't fit in with your experience. Every experience is valid. As a warning, though, please be aware that my guests could discuss topics which some may find triggering. If this is the case, please feel free to just switch off and protect your own mental health. After the chat, we'll be opening up some Q&As. Anonymous posting is an option if you are using the app, so please use today for yourselves to get the most out of it. To submit a question, if you're using the app, drop it into the Q&A box, or if you're using the browser, just drop it into the chat. Unfortunately, though, anonymous posting isn't available if you're using the browser, But we're all friends here and every question is respected. This is a safe space where we share and we learn from each other. All questions are welcome. Just please be respectful when asking, okay? So, without further waffle from me, it's time to meet my lovely panelists, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. First up, we have someone that I followed on Instagram and admire for such a long time. It's Max. Please introduce yourself, Max.
Thank you, Eva. I didn't know that you'd followed me on Instagram for a while. I thought I followed you first, so I'm honoured. Hi, everyone. My name is Max. My pronouns are they, he. I am a proud trans man, activist, speaker, general annoying trans guy on the internet. And I spend a lot of time on social media, always have, so I have a lot to say on this topic, and I love that it's being approached in this environment. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Max. Next, we have an icon in the insurance industry, Inga. Please introduce yourself, Inga.
Thank you, Eva, and hello, everyone. I'm Inga Beale, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I used to be the CEO of Lloyd's of London, but now I've stepped back from executive life and I sit on a few boards as a director. Keeps me busy, though.
Amazing. It's always good to be busy, and thank you for joining us. Now, we should have Nicola with us as well. Is Nicola in the meeting?
Well, I can't find Nicola in the list, unfortunately, so I think something may have happened. I will continue trying to track her down, but I think we should continue for now.
No problem. It'll just be the three of us. We'll keep it nice and cozy. And if Nicola does join, then we welcome her input as well. So I've got to say, it's fantastic to have you both here. It really is an honour, and I know that from having knowledge of what you both do, I know it's going to be a really rich conversation. Now, I've got to say, I was bullied throughout my years at school just for looking different. And the thing is, it was bad enough then when you know who's doing it, let alone an unknown person who's behind a keyboard or a screen or a phone. You know the ones, generic profile picture, a really generic name like Only God Can Judge Me 29473. Please don't report that. I just made that up. It's not an actual username, but it feels targeted. We feel violated when that happens. Like, how dare they come into our space completely uninvited? And the thing is, to push for change and to challenge the norms, we do need to be visible. And visibility, the way I look at it, is the most basic, yet the most important form of activism. So let's kick off with the obvious, the why. Why is it important that we do talk about this subject, especially, as part of a massive festival like this? Max, I'd like to come to you with this first one.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question before we jumped on, and I realized that the number one reaction that I get when I talk about the kind of things that I experience online is surprise. People are usually like, oh, I had no idea that this is something you experience. And I think that's the number one reason why we have to talk about it, because I have a couple of large social media presences, and occasionally I will post screenshots of things that I receive, and the number one response is genuine surprise and a genuine lack of realization about what people experience on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's about raising awareness, and particularly something that I'm experiencing right now is the problem is only getting worse. We're seeing more and more use of social media, more and more use of social media platforms, more and more ability to be anonymous on social media, as you've already mentioned. And with that comes this lack of accountability, this ability to pretty much put anything out into the world and you're not going to get in that much trouble for it. And it's very, very easy to hide. I mean, we are still at a point where the legal system hasn't really caught up with social media. So there's rarely a legal resolution. There's rarely any kind of protection. As someone who's been the target of all kinds of abuse on social media, I don't think I've ever felt that there's been somewhere for me to turn, whether that be to the platform itself, to the police, to any other kind of governing body. I don't have any memory of thinking, okay, well, I can report this here or I can escalate this here. It's particularly difficult when we talk about the social media platforms themselves. I have very rarely found that raising anything to any of the platforms has resulted in anything except, the person committing it being blocked from seeing my content, which doesn't really achieve anything. So it's a huge problem that is self-perpetuating at the moment and isn't really being discussed by anyone. And then we have to think about the effect of that. And I think anyone who's experienced any kind of bullying or any kind of negative behavior towards them can understand how it might feel. But what I don't think people realize is how much that spreads into your life. So it's not just about saying, I remember seeing someone talking about cyberbullying and they said, oh, if you're being cyberbullied, just turn off your computer. And I see the flippant nature of that, but actually it's about having freedom to use platforms the same way as everyone else, but also the fact that that seeps into all parts of your life. It affects your mental health, it affects your personal life. For a lot of people, it affects their work. I spend a lot of time and a lot of my job is content creation, and I have to use platforms where every time I post, I'm opening myself up to transphobic, queerphobic abuse to do my job and to get paid. So I actually have to choose between the two, which is really difficult. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is that often when we talk about online abuse, people think about the real extremes, the real kind of horrific, offensive, just absolutely appalling things that you can think of. And the reason why we think about those is because those are the cases that are prosecuted or brought to the police. For example, really extreme forms of racism, they can be prosecuted. But as well as that, what a lot of people experience is just an underlying continuous just campaign of hatred or campaign of negativity that they have to experience every time they open their computer, every time they open their phone. They are seeing something horrible, something a bit nasty, or somebody questioning their identity or the way that they look at the world. And that is equally as horrible. It's exhausting. It drives people off. This isn't just about one post that someone might have made that's a bit off and somebody comments something that's a bit bad. It's about continuous social attitudes towards people that are being, relentlessly commented or added to their social media platforms when really they should just be able to use it. So I think it's a huge topic, and we have to talk about it in how are we going to tackle this and what can people do to tackle this, and not just people who are experiencing it, everybody who's in a position of allyship as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Something you said right at the beginning was about education, and I've got to say that when I first came out as trans, I experienced a lot of unwanted attention from men, and they'd be sliding into DMs, they'd be leaving really inappropriate comments, and it wasn't until I started following more like trans men or gender non-conforming people, I realized that it's not just trans women, it affects all of our community. And then when we multiply that across, all the different strands of hate crime, this hate, it exists everywhere. And you're right, when it comes to platforms, I've reported comments, I've reported death threats, all sorts. And sometimes I do wonder, why do I even bother? Because nothing really happens. And if anything, they turn it around on you. And it's like, well, if you don't want to see it, feel free to block them. But it shouldn't be that way. Inga, what do you think? How's this resonated with you?
Well, I think all of these difficult topics need to be discussed. And actually, that was the sort of founding element of why we started the Dive In Festival, because we knew that there were all sorts of bad things going on. And this is in the world of work, never mind if we expand to sort of online abuse more broadly. And we needed to get people to talk about it. And my one disappointment usually in these events is that we tend to have the people who are like-minded listening in. And I know, Max, you said we've got to have a debate sort of with everyone. What I'm hoping, and the more digital we're getting, the more these events are then on the video, on the record, and other people can start watching them. And it's kind of up to almost everybody who's joined today, trying to get somebody who wouldn't naturally have joined this, saying, oh, maybe it doesn't apply to me, to get that understanding, because this is the whole point of this festival, is actually really starting a dialogue and exploring these tough topics, which some people might be totally oblivious to. And this was the founding of Dive In, and I'm so pleased that we're having this discussion. And of course, the digital world is going to be all around us. everything in our lives is going to be digital. So we can't just think of social media or any sort of online abuse as just disappearing, because it's not going to. And it's just made it so immediate, so instant. And, you know, I can remember physically being in places where you might feel threatened because there was a physical gathering of like-minded people and they sort of took on this sort of tribal or mob-like behavior. Now that mob-like behavior can happen in seconds on social media. And the other thing that some people don't understand now, you've got concerted efforts with people grouping together and purposely going after individuals and abusing them. Now that is like warfare. I mean, that's like a horrible guerrilla type of effort. And that is really, really nasty and painful. And I think we've got to have a discussion, not just about the topic today, many topics that are covered under this festival, but this one is a particularly important one because they can hide behind that anonymity.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, like, when we look at being in the workplace, we spend so much time in the workplace that whenever we have personal issues, online bullying outside of the workplace, it's natural for it to come into the workplace and to affect our productivity, because you feel so violated that you just can't shake it. And I think what you've said is really hits it on the head, because we're so connected these days. I mean, if you have to look at some of the platforms like Facebook, you had to be somebody's friend to be able to really interact with them. On the flip side, Twitter, it was very direct. You know, you could contact celebrities, you could speak to companies, there was that way in. It was so immediate. But then the negative is that immediacy, that way in can be targeted. And now, Max, I'm sure you're aware as well, like gender critical groups and various pylons. Like Inga's just said, it's a concerted effort. They set out to do this, and it's like they've created this club, this group where they would digitally go out and lynch someone, which is just incredibly scary. I mentioned earlier that, I mean, I suffered from bullying from when I was at school, and even as an adult, I still face it. All just because others do go out of the way to make it known that they personally don't agree with me. Now, it's unavoidable. I can't be visible without putting myself out there about talking about my experiences. And I'd like to ask each of you to share a little bit about your experiences as well. I acknowledge that we've all been through so much to get to where we are now. So please feel free to share as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. Inga, if you'd like to share something with us.
Yeah, and of course we mustn't shut up. We have to be visible. You have to have your voice heard, because things tend to be, they're going backwards at the moment in the world. I'm very scared about the situation. And I remember when the Brexit vote came through and suddenly the hate crime, particularly against the LGBTQ plus community, started to rise. This is alarming. But I mean, my own personal experience, I guess, really goes back to when I was at Lloyd's of London. Before then, I wasn't really using social media much. And over the years, I had abuse walking down the street. So at one time when I was in a lesbian relationship, walking down the street with my girlfriend and people yelling abuse from the other side of the street or from cars and things like that. And you sort of, I don't know, you put up with it, but it's now reached another level. And when I was at Lloyd's, I was out about my sexuality, and I had not just actual online abuse, but I had a lot of more old-fashioned abuse. And I guess partly because there was a generational difference. So I came in at Lloyd's and there was perhaps the more traditional, maybe older generation, but not necessarily, just an age categorization there. But they really objected to me. They didn't like the fact that I was a female in that role. They didn't like me being open about my sexuality. They didn't like me accusing perhaps the market of having some homophobic tendencies or sexist behaviors or racist thoughts going on. So I was under a lot of scrutiny, and I got anonymous letters. So sometimes they'd be handwritten, sometimes they'd be typed. Even had once where someone had cut out the letters, out of magazines, newspapers, and stuck them on. I mean, things like that. And basically asking me to go and kill myself, that I didn't deserve the job, that I should resign immediately, very abusive things. Now, when they were arriving on paper, my coping mechanism was screw them up and throw them away, sort of press delete. If they came in by email, I press delete. Now, when you get them online and you on your Twitter feed, and quite honestly, I've closed my Twitter account, I've closed my Facebook account now, but that then was a totally different phenomenon for me, because I hadn't really experienced that. But because I wanted to show myself as open, I wanted to show the Lloyd's market as being modern, I wanted to modernize the market. I listened to particularly the younger generation who said, even though you're the CEO, you've got to be a human. We want to know who you are. You've got to be out there on social media. So I really upped my social media presence. And then this abuse came, and often from anonymous people. And I could, in a way, not read it. But I suppose that's a certain resilience that I had at the time that enabled me, because there was so much going on at work and I was trying to drive so much change, I would sort of be able to cut those comments out. And also I had a communications team who would be able to sort of keep track of things like that, and often then, not make them visible to me. So I didn't follow all my the comments that were made to me online and things like that. So I was in a privileged position because I had a sort of team around me to support. But I can tell you, it didn't stop people being very, very abusive.
And that's it, isn't it? Like, if people want to be abusive, sometimes it could be just microaggressions in the workplace. Sometimes it could be very, very direct. But if they want to be abusive, they find a way. And personally, I think, don't take up a hobby. Do something. Surely there could be something better you could be doing. Max, what about your experiences? How have they been?
I mean, how long have we got? I also want to say to whoever cut out the letters for Inga's hate, literally, how much time do you have on your hands? Because I feel like that takes a really long time. That's a commitment. So I mean, I always joke that I can show my age by how long I've been on the internet. Trans people are famously ageless, but whenever I talk about Tumblr, people are like, "Wait, I thought you were like 16." So I've been on the internet most of my adult life as a millennial. My main platform right now is Instagram, and that is for a very good reason, in that I find it is probably the safest. I don't have Twitter anymore. The TERFs, it's not worth it. 140 characters is not enough to convey nuance, and people don't want to try and understand that they might be interpreting something wrong. They just want to be angry. So Instagram is my main space at the moment, and I want to kind of flag that there's a really interesting technical side to this, which is when we talk about algorithms. So Instagram, on the whole, you are going to be showing content that shares your interests. So if you're a trans person like me, you're going to see other trans people are going to see your content. So you're in this fairly safe bubble, I guess. And I think Inga mentioned it, we end up in this echo chamber where we're saying, this is really bad. And everyone else was like, yeah, it's really bad. And we don't get to talk to people outside of it. But it is a safe space. So Instagram is my main space. At the moment, I'm compiling some evidence about TikTok, because obviously TikTok is kind of the big new phenomena, and if you work in marketing at all you will see is people saying TikTok is the new Instagram, TikTok is the new Google, TikTok, all your money should be here. And I'm looking at it as a trans creator who, every time one of my videos goes viral or gets more than a couple thousand views, I get torrents of hate. Absolute torrents. People telling me that I'm a paedophile, people telling me that I'm mentally ill. I posted a video about visiting my niece, and it was just some silly thing about, oh, your trans uncle is here, nobody knows what he does for work, but he's always on holiday. And people saying like, I wouldn't let you near my kids, you're not coming near me. And I have to read this. I don't have the option but to read it. It comes up. I see it on my notifications. I would love to have somebody managing my social media for me, but I'm definitely not that big yet. Once I get to that level, I will do. But what it ended up in happening is that I just went off TikTok for a month. Couldn't do it, couldn't use it. It was directly affecting my mental health. You know, you wake up in the morning, you look at your phone and you just flick on to watch some videos and you just have this torrent of hatred there for trying to create something that's just lighthearted and funny. And, you know, a lot of my social media presence is about showing a positive side of being trans. It's not toxic positivity, but it's about saying, hey, you can be trans and happy and in a relationship and have a good job and all of these things that people don't realize that they can have. So it was really negative and it was really horrible. And I had to speak to my agent who was putting me through for TikTok jobs. And I said, I'm not doing it. I've recently gone back on and I'm kind of limiting my time on it, but I was directly losing money because I wouldn't take on jobs that involved me going on TikTok. It just was too dangerous. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize about abuse. I also do a lot of work on LinkedIn. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll know that I don't pull my punches very much, but something that amazes me is the amount of people who have their name, their job title, and their picture, and they still feel able to post something offensive. And I'm not necessarily saying the same viciousness that you get on platforms where people can be more anonymous, but it's almost this worse kind of gaslighty abuse where someone's like, oh, I'm perfectly entitled to think this, and they'll try and say it in this very, I didn't know that, I was just asking a question. Someone recently tried to tell me that the trans flag was a paedophile flag, and when I said I don't think it is, I was the villain for jumping on them because they hadn't realized that they were wrong. They actually knew they were wrong and they were just trying to be offensive. But my point is, people are not ashamed of these views. They are not holding back. And there's a positive side to it as well, in that when this does happen on a lot of social media, I get people responding on my behalf, I get people messaging me, I get people correcting them, and that's what I love. That is like real allyship to me. But even the fact that on a place that is supposed to be a professional networking platform, I can still receive people telling me that my desire for healthcare makes me entitled, and things like that, and things that kind of really chip away at people's everything to do with you. It absolutely drains you. And something that worries me, I know we were just talking about resilience. I have been doing this for a long time and I'm pretty used to it. On the whole, I'm able to laugh at it. If it's really nasty, I'll just block and report it. I run a series called Bigots of LinkedIn, which is where I post screenshots of stupid comments that people have left me with my responses. I do take their names out, so it doesn't count as bullying, but it's just my way of showing people what we deal with and getting back a little bit. But what actually really scares me is other people seeing these comments, other trans people, other queer people who aren't as public, but maybe haven't come out yet. And they might be following me because they're like, oh, look, another person who looks like me. And then they see me getting loads of abuse. And it's like, that's not going to help them. That's not going to help them feel comfortable coming out and know that they're supported. And that's actually what worries me more, rather than what comes to me specifically. Have we lost Eva?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
But Max, I was going to say about LinkedIn, because I always thought of it, as being this very, very professional platform, and I'm alarmed. I've had comments on there, and people have just, and of course they're not anonymous, and they've said vomit to a comment, and I'm thinking, well, how dare you? Why do you feel you have the right to post that when I'm posting sort of something on a professional platform? Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the posts about this very session today, somebody actually wasn't necessarily abusive towards me or to any of us, but it was talking about something completely different. It was talking about Iran, because they managed to just tap on to the number of followers for that post. And this is what's so scary about social media now, is that you can tag anyone, and I know you can pick up and remove the tag on you, but it's just like you can just jump on this stuff, and someone then who's got a huge number of followers, a comment, just because your name's in there, suddenly appears, and people get it in their feed, and it's nothing even to do with you. So it's a scary world, and I know LinkedIn is doing some good stuff, but I mean, I've had duplicate profiles several times now, false profiles on LinkedIn. Not now, because I'm not so much, I don't have such a profile myself, but when I was out there a lot, yes, false profiles would get set up. And then, the amount of time it takes to get those removed, that's an effort in itself.
Yeah, it is scary how many false profiles there are, and it's like they've reached another level to abuse you, because they're, if anything, they're doing something worse. They're taking you, your identity, what you've achieved, and they're essentially running it into the ground just because they can. I mean, I had someone following me on Instagram who openly transphobic, and I called her out on it, and I even said, why do you even follow me? Her response was quite simply, I think you're a joke and it amuses me. And I just think you really, really need to tune out. But you were talking about algorithms earlier, Max, and that's something that I don't think they realize. The more you interact with certain accounts and certain account types, the more of that content you will see. So those who are openly transphobic, who go out and leave those comments on trans people's posts, what they don't realize is they're generating more content on their own feed to hate, which, if it really winds them up that we exist, fine, that's for them to deal with. But at the same time, Max, you said something about, those that are vulnerable, those that can't handle it. We've got to be mindful of them. And events like this are so important because it helps us to arm each other with coping mechanisms. Now, we've heard about experiences, and we've heard about those negatives, and I think it's time to turn those into positive action for all. And to do so, we do need goals. We need a direction. We need vision, something to focus on. So in an ideal world, Max, what would you like to see happen to tackle online abuse?
More of these events, number one. So I think it starts with education, as it always does. We have kids in schools who are on social media from a younger and younger age, but as far as I know, they are not being taught about the dangers of the internet, outside of kind of grooming and things like that. They're not taught about the mental health side effects. They're also not taught about the effects of online abuse if they are the person perpetuating it. There are people coming into the social media sphere, and as you said, it opens up more and more. The way that these platforms are designed is for content discovery. So the more you interact, the more you post, the more you see. There are younger people coming into these places who have no idea about what can come at them, and also no idea about how their actions can affect others. So I think it starts with education from a young age, because unfortunately, more and more people from a younger age are finding themselves on social media. I also think that we need to see much better legal protection and legal understanding of what's happening. Our legal system is fairly antiquated at best, and it needs to be updated very quickly so that people who are experiencing this kind of abuse can report it and know that they are going to be supported, just to give people a route of escalation, because I really don't see one at the moment. And I've really tried to get people to take this seriously, but really, unless my life is perceived to be in danger, I'm pretty much on my own, which is pretty scary. And those legal protections come hand in hand with better reporting and support options from the platforms that we're on. So I would say in my personal experience, LinkedIn is one of the better ones. They are pretty good at removing people and pretty good at, tackling community guideline issues. Instagram and Facebook, unfortunately, in my experience, have been horrific. I've had my account suspended for, responding to people telling me to kill myself. I've been banned from various things. I've probably report 3 to 4 comments a day, and I have screenshots of my reporting history where it says, we didn't find a violation, we didn't find a violation, we didn't find a violation. And I'm thinking, okay, so what do you need to do to find a violation? Because if this doesn't count, I don't know what does. And the only way that they are going to start taking that seriously is if they start getting pressure from people, but also companies and groups of people like this who are saying, actually, this isn't acceptable, and we don't feel comfortable using a platform that allows people to experience this kind of abuse. So it's hand in hand, legal support and education, and the platform's playing a role in that. And I think it's also important to recognize that, you know, these are all money-making companies that are designed to sell advertising and views and, you know, all of the products that Meta and Instagram and LinkedIn sell. So we have to try and work with them where they can understand that it is much more important for people to be safe in these spaces and then be able to use the advertising revenue from there, as opposed to just allowing everyone to do everything and just taking the money. We have to have that accountability. And the final thing I would like to see, and I have no idea how this would happen, is something that I mentioned about Twitter, which is nuance. And maybe it comes into the education piece, but it's about asking people to think a little bit more when they see something online. So a lot of the abuse that I receive is when people either unintentionally or intentionally misinterpret something that I'm saying and will then comment on it with kind of very little thought and say something quite offensive. We have to get better at thinking about what we are saying before we say it on social media. And you know, it's an age-old adage to say, think before you speak, but on the internet, it's equally as important. Why is this person saying this? Am I misinterpreting it? Do I understand this person's point of view? There are so many things that can go behind a post or a tweet. Think about that first. Think about, you know, researching what might be going on. Think about the effects that your comments might be having. Read what other people have written about it before kind of diving into something. We're exposed to so much content and we're exposed to so many things so quickly, particularly when you think about kind of Reels and TikTok. All of this information going in, and people will make a very quick snap judgment and then we'll share that snap judgment. And a lot of the time it's actually not quite right and it's not really relevant, but we're very used to being able to do that. So it's kind of an overall plea from me. It's just to please think more about the, you know, the information and the comments that you're putting out there. People come to me as a influencer and they're surprised that I see all of these comments, and I'm thinking, I'm right there behind the phone. I don't know what you think is happening when you put these comments up, but I see them. They literally pop up on my screen. So if you think, oh, it's fine, nobody's going to see it, maybe you shouldn't be writing it at all.
And I
Absolutely,
just, Eva, we can't see you, by the way. I don't know whether you accidentally turned your camera off, but we can't see your face anymore.
How's that? I've just turned it off and on again. Has that worked?
No, sadly, we've just got EE on the screen.
Oh,
anyway,
no.
I just wanted to just respond to something you said, Max, because you see, I think before we had this ability to immediately respond, naturally, when we get angry about something or we do this, that happens very, very quickly. But that thoughtful response, sort of when you're thinking actually, and you're being a bit, perhaps showing a bit of empathy towards something, that usually takes much longer to appear in us as humans. So it's really tough because the immediacy of that button or the quick way you can type something in and send it means that those sort of more angry emotional things happen more quickly than the empathetic ones. And I think that's a challenge. And I'm still trying to work my way through, because you're absolutely right about the sort of legal side, and in all of the digitization that's going on in the world, of course, regulation and the legal system is not keeping up at all with anything. But there is this online safety bill that's going through Parliament at the moment. And I've read a little bit about what it's meant to be covering. And one of the things that I hope it does is it will enable you, if the social media platform is going to ask for verification of you, you know, who you are, and then you can, I believe, providing you're choosing the right platform provider, then say, actually, I don't want anyone who's not verified themselves to be able to follow me or comment on me. And I think I haven't quite worked through whether that's a good thing. I believe it's going to be a good thing when that, assuming it goes through Parliament and the House of Lords and everything, and it gets signed off. I think that's a really good move. But they also mentioned, which sounds like they were speaking to the right people, that some people use their online social media anonymously because they're suffering from domestic abuse. They need to be anonymous to seek help and communicate, or they're a young person. We can see you, Eva. Or they're a young person exploring their sexuality and things like that. So hopefully that new bill, when it comes out, will also give extra powers about preventing online abuse or taking action against abusers, because at the moment it seems to be a lot around, well, it's not illegal to say something, so you can't take any action against them. Well, actually maybe this new bill will change a bit of that, and that's what I'm hoping for.
I hope so. And I think as someone who was a young queer person hiding anonymously on the internet for quite a while, I do understand both sides of it. But I think that, you know, there can be an accountability, which is you can still be anonymous, but the platform itself knows who you are. And if you do break these guidelines, you can be held accountable. You don't have to be public, but you do have to have some kind of attachment. I mean, right now you can go on any social media platform and make any account under any name, and very few of them will verify you. I used to work for a dating app, and we had the same problem when we ended up verifying people, and we changed it so you could only match with people who were verified because it's just not safe. And you know, you've hit the nail on the head. It is a really difficult place to legislate in because it's ever changing and there's no one size fits all solution. But I do believe that accountability should help people, especially in places like LinkedIn.
Absolutely, yeah. I've just seen in the comments, I believe Nicola's with us now. Nicola, you there?
You should be able to enable your mic and your video. There we go. Perfect. Oh, you need to just unmute yourself.
Hi, Nicola.
Hang on one sec. Let me just double check. But I'm just going to disable your mic and then enable it again. I've just enabled
the old off and on
it.
again always works for live broadcasts and live streams, doesn't it?
Indeed. Nicola, you might have to unmute yourself. No, it's not letting you.
Oh, no.
That is a shame. Just trying one other thing.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. Just a few technical hitches.
Yeah,
it's funny how we have technical hitches like these when we're trying to do something good. There's never a technical hitch when you know, haters trying to post a comment. You know, it just crashes for them. If only, huh?
Yeah, sorry, I've tried disabling and enabling a couple of times, but Nicola, if you're not able to unmute yourself, I'm not sure what the problem is, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've made you a presenter as well. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion in the chat.
I'm sorry, Nicola. Well, I mean, in the follow-up that will go out after this, if we can get some comments from Nicola regarding things that she would like to share with us, and hopefully we can get it out that way as well.
Yes, and there's a suggestion there.
Yeah,
maybe Nicola can make a couple of comments in the chat. But yeah,
that'd be fantastic. And I'll keep an eye out for those comments. I'm just conscious of time, and one thing I'd really love to kind of ask both of you, and indeed Nicola in the chat, is for somebody that's going through online abuse at the moment, maybe feeling afraid to talk about it, afraid to even delete it, because sometimes, you know, when you've got that comment staring at you, to bring yourself to delete it, you know, go onto the app, open it to see it, it's quite traumatic. What advice would you give to somebody that's experiencing it right now? Inga, as someone who's relatively new, you said earlier that you've just kind of dived into social media now. I mean, what sort of advice would you give to people?
Well, I used to, as I sort of said earlier, delete things, but I would say to anyone, actually try not to delete, because now I'm no longer in my role, but I would love, from this position of feeling strong, look at all of those awful comments, maybe even publish them one day, you know, write a book about it. I don't know. So I would actually say to people, try not to delete it, try to capture it, but in some way, and so maybe put it to one side so that it's not there facing you. But I would actually say don't delete it, because you might want it in the future. So that's one thing. But if you really are not able to find anyone to talk to me, then that is such a shame, because there are so many networks, platforms, and particularly if you're from the insurance sector, I tell you, you know, if you're from the LGBTQ plus community, we've got the Link network that's been going for years. There are all sorts of people you can safely speak to through that platform, either virtually or go along to one of their events if you're up north or in the south of England. So there are people who you can talk to safely. And I, in the past, have been asked by somebody who, you know, maybe they were gay and they didn't know, and they came to me and I put them in touch, and they had super safe conversations with people. So there will always be a group or a network or somebody that you can reach out to. So, because to me, it's a lot of it is being able to share it, because, you know, because I've spoken so much about some of the abuse I had, I actually feel much better about it. And this is why I'm saying I'm speaking from a position of strength now, because I have been able to share it a lot, and I've got stronger and stronger, and I can be much more resilient about it now. And that's why sharing it to me is the best way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that point. Yeah, just leave the comment, because those genuine followers, those that actually wants to engage with you, those who subscribe to your content because they like you, they, you know, what you say aligns with their values, they will see those hateful comments, and those haters will just show themselves up. It's a lasting legacy of their hate, and people will see that and just think, shut up, go away. You know, they've done it to themselves, really. Max, what about you? What advice would you give?
Definitely ask for help. As Inga said, I think talking about it opens it up. Social media can be a echo chamber, and you can get inside your own head. My girlfriend has gotten very good at knowing when something has happened on the internet. She saw me delete LinkedIn on Friday, which I usually do for the weekend. She was like, "Has someone been mean again?" I was like, "No, I just didn't want to be on it for the weekend." But she's very conscious of that, and it is something that we talk about a lot. But I also want to remind people that it is okay to take a break when it comes to social media. We have this idea that we need to be on there all the time, and particularly if it's part of your role or, you know, part of your personal brand. Often algorithms will penalize you for not posting every day or not being online every single day, but we need to remember to prioritize our health, our mental health, our physical health. It doesn't mean, you know, the trolls have won if you move away from that platform. I think for a while I had this idea in my head that if I, you know, went off Instagram or stopped using TikTok, it was letting them win. And actually, I think that's a really toxic idea. It just means that I would rather prioritize myself than reading those horrible messages. So it is okay to take a break, and also that you don't always have to engage. I think the temptation when you read those comments is to cut back or try and educate. And sometimes that works, like sometimes that's helpful. And if you have the energy and the ability to do so, then you can. But a lot of the time, these people are not coming to you for a debate. They're not coming for a conversation. They're coming to be nasty. So putting your energy and, you know, trying to offer empathy to them in that way can just be incredibly draining. So choose when you respond, choose when you don't respond. A fun tip for everyone: if you block someone on LinkedIn but don't delete their comment, everyone else can see it, but you can't anymore. So you can actually respond to someone and then block them. So you don't have to look at it, but everyone can see what an idiot they've made of themselves. So that's a fun thing that I use a lot. But yeah, give yourself a break if you need to. Do what feels right to you, and if that is, you know, blocking, deleting, reporting, then do that. Don't allow yourself to be at the whim of these people. It's your space. You have every right to be on the internet, and you have every right to be there safely. So just don't allow it to control what you do and don't do. The other thing I would remind people is that if there is ever a brand or a company involved, raise it to them, because people have a lot more respect, particularly when it can come into their role. So if you're, you know, if you're in a work environment, for example, do raise it to HR, raise it to your people team, or raise it to someone who you know is an ally in the environment that you're in, because people will help you. And having that conversation, even just somebody sympathizing and saying, "This sucks, I'm sorry you're experiencing this," can be really powerful.
Definitely, yeah. Opening up and talking about it. Something Nicola's mentioned in the chat is, yeah, just echoing that. It is important to talk about it, because Inga, something you mentioned earlier, like it feels liberating when you share that experience. And I hope, you know, today's event has allowed people to realize they're not the only ones. You know, we may be very different in our own lived experiences, but when it comes to things like hate and online abuse, there are lots and lots of overlaps. And something else Nicola's pointed out is that it's their problem. You know, they're projecting onto you, and whatever this issue that they have, we've discussed, and I know we've kind of joked, it's a bit of a, you know, get yourselves a hobby, do something else. But really, when we boil it down, it is that there is something that's not going right for them, but they see that something's going right for us. We're on the right path. We're doing something. We're happy. And it's like they need to bring that down. They need to rain on our parade, and just exposing them by leaving their comment for all to see, not engaging with them, it kind of just nips it in the bud. You know, we don't allow that hate to grow on our platforms, on a space that we own. So I'm just conscious of time. I just wanted to check with Mark if we'd had any questions for those using the Teams app. I think, oh, we've got, in the meantime, there's a question for Inga. As a woman and diversity ally, I found Inga extremely motivational in all areas of diversity whilst at Lloyd's, and a forerunner in cultural diversity in an old-fashioned corporate world at the time. Did Inga find the bullying and personal attacks in the corporate world a hindrance to her doing the job as effectively as she wanted? And if she was to start that position now, what would she do differently? What would she change? You know, how she approached it, how she dealt with it?
I wasn't quite prepared for it, particularly, as I said, because before I took the role, I hadn't really been on social media. I hadn't had such a high profile role before. So I wasn't prepared for it. So if I would do this again, I would now be so much better prepared. I would have my armor on, if you like, because it did affect me a lot. And I can remember once just thinking, you know, I felt like I was Arnie Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, just having to keep moving forward and all these missiles coming towards me. And I was sort of having to tell myself, just keep going. Doesn't matter what's coming at you, just keep going. And it was an amazing support I had from family and friends. So I did keep work and life and personal life very separate in terms of who I socialized with. And that meant when I was out of that very stressful work situation, I was able to really relax with my friends and not talk about it that much and have just a very, very different experience. But certainly it was tough. I also, particularly around trying to drive culture change, I had it not only, I had abuse from all sorts of people, but actually also top down a little bit. I had people say, Inga, you shouldn't be talking about that so much. So they did it politely, but I sort of felt pressure from everywhere to sort of want to put me back in my little box. And fortunately, there was enough movement and support that enabled me to move forward. And I tell you, you only had to have one positive comment come in a day to make you feel that you had the strength to carry on. It's amazing. You know, all those negatives can be there. Then you get that one, it doesn't matter who it's from almost, but that supportive thing, or you've changed their life, or they feel more positive about the world. And then you go, it's all worth it. And it makes you want to carry on.
Amazing. And it's that carrying on, isn't it? And I know the exact scene that you mean with the Arnold Schwarzenegger film. And in the words of Arnie, we will be back. You know, we've sadly run out of time today, but you know, these events are important and we need to keep these conversations going, not just once a year, but throughout the year in the workplace. Always keep talking about it. Max, Nicola and Inga, I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. And I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to be a part of today's discussion as well. I can only apologise for the technical issues, but I hope you've all managed to take something away from it as well. And I just want everyone to remember that hate and abuse really doesn't care about gender identity, sexuality, race, or anything else. Today has shown that no matter what our background or intersections are, we're all at risk. And that's why it's even more important that we learn from each other so that we can all be better prepared and that we can all stand united against hate. And we will be, because hate will never win. So thank you very much. and I hope you've really enjoyed today.